history retold. I'm going to start off by apologizing. I'm a senior long retired from construction work, and my writing skills are not up to some of the polished stories that I've read, true or fake. My story is true, but it happened a long time ago. I think that it'll still apply to today's world. My childhood best friend disappeared when we were in our mid-20s. I couldn't get him on the phone. He simply dropped off the face of Earth. He finally called me one evening, and of course I was asking him what had happened. He said he had to spend some time in a rest home, said he didn't want to talk about it on the phone and that he would come over. After showing up, we sat down and he started relating a tale that began when he was around 16 or so. He ran off with a 20-year-old woman. She ended up being my ex-wife's best friend for a long time. Back to the tale. It was during Vietnam, and anyone who was eligible for the draft couldn't get a job because no company wanted to hire you, train you, and then lose you to the military. He managed to find a job working nights at a gas station, full service back then. He rented a garage apartment and was struggling to make enough money to live on. He said one week all they had for food was a sack of potatoes until his next paycheck. A gigolo as his profession. Seriously, he always found an older woman who would support him for a while before wising up and tossing him out. I say that to set the stage for what happened next. His brother calls him out and tells him his wife is cheating on him. Said he didn't believe it. Told him, haven't you noticed she has pocket money when you don't? Has cigarettes when you don't? I'm telling you, a guy comes over to your place right after you leave for work every night. He decides to find out the truth, and that night he gets ready for work as usual and drives off to park one street over where he can see the apartment. 15 minutes after he leaves, a car pulls up and a guy goes into his apartment. He waits, and when the guy comes out, he decides to follow him back home, then goes over to a friend's home. He asks to borrow a weapon. Ooh. His buddy was asking him what did he need it for, and he tells him he's planning on offing his wife's lover. His buddy refuses to loan him the weapon, so he goes to another friend and asks him for a weapon and tells him the same story. He also refuses to loan him a weapon, but he decides he's just going to beat the guy until he's unalived if they won't lend him a weapon. They both jump in the car with him. He drives over to the guy's home, and the guy's family is throwing a big party with people all around. He jumps out of the car and grabs the guy out in the yard and begins to beat him. They end up down in the ditch with him seriously trying to beat him until he was unalived. The guy's parents are screaming, and the guy is begging him not to off him, insisting my buddy's wife was calling him and begging him to come over. At any rate, my buddy's friend left the car and grabbed him, tossing him in the back seat and driving away before the police arrived. They take him to his car, and he goes back home and promptly runs his cheating wife off. Her parents come to him, and even though this is 50 years ago, utter that time-worn phrase, "We didn't raise her this way." I had no idea that line is so old. After much crying and begging on her part, he makes the mistake of letting her return home. Wow, why did he do that? Why did he let her crawl back? 4 or 5 years roll by, and times have gotten better. He bought a small older home and has gotten a good job that pays decent money and has a new baby, his first. Then one night he gets in from work and his wife and baby aren't home. He figures she's out with her mother or girlfriend shopping, so he relaxes for a while. As the evening runs on, he still hasn't heard from his wife and begins to worry about her. He calls her mother, who says she hasn't seen her. He phones her girlfriends, who also say they haven't seen her. It's getting to be late, so he calls the police, and they know nothing. He calls all the hospitals, nothing, and he's falling apart, worrying. All night, nothing. Next day, still no word. I know you can guess where this is going. Later that evening, his phone rings, but it's one of his wife's girlfriends who begins to tell him this convoluted story. Seems she has a cousin who lived in Alabama. The cousin started having an affair with a married woman who wouldn't leave her boyfriend, so he drove over to her home, rang the doorbell, and popped her husband. He was unalived. The police were after him, so he left the state, coming here to Texas, where his cousin lived. She introduced him to my buddy's wife, and they began having an affair. One day, he won't let her leave and tells her he's going over to off her husband at 7 p.m. on Friday. Don't know why he chose that moment, but that was the plan. My buddy's wife apparently was fine with that happening, as she didn't say anything. Wow. Her girlfriend knew my buddy and wouldn't allow her to not warn him of the plot to off him. She filled him in on all the details and hung up. That he sat there for a while trying to decide what to do at that point, and then he picked up the phone and called the local FBI office. He was asking if they were looking for so-and-so wanted for offing someone in Alabama. They said yes and was asking if he knew where he was. He told them no, but that guy was supposed to come to his home on Friday at 7 to off him. Come Friday, the FBI parked the street over and snuck in his back door. At 7, a guy crosses his yard and walks up on his porch. The FBI grabbed the guy and hauled him away. He manages to file for divorce and gets the home, child, and almost everything else. The judge grilled his wife on why she didn't call and warn him, and she told him she was too afraid of the guy and he never left her alone. The judge didn't buy it, but let her off, while I think she deserved to be charged as an accessory to attempted offing. So at that point, my buddy had a nervous breakdown. In the end, he ended up marrying again, and this woman gave him several children, stood at his side while he was injured at work and couldn't work for some time. Now in their 70s, still happy and married to each other. His story is why I always tell guys who have a wife, cheat on them, to dump her and move on. Don't even consider taking her back if you value your life and health. I don't know if you can use this story, but I've wanted to tell it for years before I can no longer remember the details from so long ago. Thanks.